Big win for the Saints. It felt like kind of the type of game where they needed to get over that one to be able to move forward and continue the pursuit of their goals. The Vikings have kind of been the roadblock for them the last few years, really. And those games have come up in the playoffs. So to get a win over them, the way they got a win over them, I think is important just for the psyche. And I'm probably way overblowing this, but it felt a little bit like Jordan finally beating the Pistons. And maybe that's how this looks when we look back on it. Maybe not. The Vikings aren't really as good of a team as they once were, but they're still a tough opponent. And they know the Saints well. That's almost like a divisional game with how often they play. And the Saints literally ran them off the field. Alvin Kamara, one of the greatest performances of all time. We're going to get into all that. Carolina coming up this week. It's an important game to win, obviously, for the fight for seeding and all that stuff. Number one's still alive. They should be able to go in there, get that win, get out, get healthy, get to the playoffs, and then the chips fall kind of where they may in the playoffs with these other teams having to, you need Green Bay to lose, you need Seattle to win, you need the Saints to win, and if all that stuff happens, this team gets the number one seed. It kind of stinks to have the fate of the postseason and the seeding in the hands of somebody else, to somebody else's, honestly. But for the Saints to even be in this position when they've had 10 quarters of football with Drew Brees and Michael Thomas on the field, it's kind of outrageous. And, I thought Ryan Hinton from the Saints Twitter podcast, I tweeted that the other day. He made a good point. He said he would have guessed that if you told him that before the season, that the Saints would have been picking somewhere around that 10 or 11 range. And honestly, I think that's a fair assessment. Those are two of the top five most important players on the team. You could make the argument they're 1 and 2 before the season. They would have been very close to 1 and 2. I can't remember where we ranked them. I think I had Mike at number 1, and I don't think that was a bad assessment, but they've been fine without him, and they've been fine without Drew, and they've been fine with everybody else because that's how good this coaching staff is. But for them to be in this position, yeah, it stinks that you got to, look in scoreboard watch and it's going to be 325 and there's going to be 3 games going on at the same time that all have the same implications. But for them to even be in this position, given that fact, is outrageous. It's a credit to how good this season has gone, even though at times it's felt like the season hasn't even started because there's been so many players missing and so many injuries. And it's just been like a constant ramping up, and then something else happens and they got to overcome something, and they always do. But now they're rolling into the playoffs, and, it's unbelievable that this season's already over. So we're going to get into all those things. We're going to talk about those things, possible opponents, the key factors for the playoffs, all that stuff. And again, as I say every single week, I deeply appreciate all the support that everybody gives us. If you like what we're doing on the podcast, please go to NewOrleans.Football/subscribe. $9, subscribe. You'll get all kinds of analysis. It'll help us keep doing the podcast, doing more stuff with the podcast. We've brought on the video element. Make sure you're checking us out on YouTube. Even if you don't want to watch it going on there, just hitting subscribe. That helps us out. It helps the numbers go up, and all that stuff does matter. So all the support you guys give us, just with it being the holiday season, I don't like to talk about this too much, but I just feel like I gotta just take a moment to just thank everybody and let everybody know just how deeply grateful I am for all the support. Being back here covering this team, this is the happiest I've ever been professionally. Doing my own thing, direct to you guys supporting me working for you. I couldn't ask for anything better. Over the last year, I learned, being away, I learned just how deep and special our relationship is. My relationship with you, the way you guys embrace me, the way the city embraces me. It's not something I'll ever be able to take for granted ever again. And I'm not sure I ever did, but I definitely did not to some degree. To some degree that there was. But, I'm back, I learned, and the love has just been incredible all year. So we're here, we're standing, we're still standing, we'll still be standing next year at this time. And it's just been unreal. So thank you. Those of you on the fence, join in. I promise you, I work as hard as I possibly can to always make it worth your while. So with that said, yeah, this last game, a few things stood out. The first thing to me that has stood out, and I don't think Breeze is all the way dialed in yet, but I do think that there are things about his game that look better than they have. And they're doing things with the deep pass. I wrote a story about this. They're calling plays that they used to only call for Taysom. And I'm going back 4 years, and it's not in its entirety. It's half a route concept, but they're calling this play going max protect on it, and it's basically a shot down the field or a check down. And they've ran it other times with backside stuff. A backside crossing route is usually a part of it, and that's almost always where Drew goes with the ball. They're calling it now, though, where everybody's blocking and he's throwing the ball down the field, which is crazy. Like, they're telling you that they believe in Drew's arm more now than they have at other points. And they can say whatever they want in a press conference. They can say whatever they want with their mouths or whatever. When it comes time to call plays, you're going to see what they think about a player. And they're telling you that Drew's arm is healthier than it's been. So he showed up on the injury report a little bit earlier in the season with a shoulder injury. And week 1, they saw a lot of cover 2, so they weren't taking shots down the field. And I know that's a little bit, kind of like, all right, whatever. So you play a 2-deep safety zone, and Drew can't throw the ball down the field. What's that, the magic defense? But really, it has been for them for a while. And that's not something that they've attacked aggressively. They get that look, and they attack it underneath. And these last couple of games, they saw a little bit more one high single safety. So maybe that's why Drew's going down the field a little bit more too. But that coupled with the approach and the way they're calling plays tells me that Drew's healthier than he has been at other points in the season. And I can't say at any other point this season because maybe early in the year when they were seeing these 2 shell looks, that took away some of the deeper shots. But look, last week, 2 weeks ago, against 2 games ago, they had cover 2. Drew threw down the field, hit it up the sideline against Kansas City. Those aren't throws he was making, not even the last couple of years. I'm not saying he's healthier or he's more whatever. I'm just saying that simply, and you can put it together however you want, that he is hitting some throws that he wasn't hitting in recent seasons. Well, not last year, not this year, maybe not the year before. He looks healthy, and I think that is super encouraging. I think it's a big deal for this team for him to be able to make those throws down the field. Now, we talk all the time like, hey, he doesn't have to have this super big arm. He doesn't have to be making those throws against cover 2. He doesn't have to be doing, 40-yard throws down the field to Emmanuel Sanders. These things don't have to happen. But if they can happen and he can show just enough arm, that's enough. And that'll back people off. And then you won't see 7 in the box on Alvin. It's a little bit harder to cheat that safety down when they're showing you a run look. And then over here, it's a 2-route combination and Drew's throwing the ball down the field. And it's basically, a one-on-one. They're forced into a one-on-one situation. When that stuff's happening, they become a lot harder to defend. And you're seeing signs of them being able to do more. Now, there's pieces missing. Mike Thomas is missing. That Drew's arm isn't all the way dialed in. He's still missing some throws. There's still some inaccuracies. There's still some miscommunications with his receivers. On the interception, it looked like Drew messed up that, it initially looked like Jared Cook messed up that route and he wasn't on the same page with Drew, but Peyton went on WWL talking to Streif, let him know that, the ball wasn't placed exactly where it was supposed to be. So there's still some stuff going on with Drew that needs to be a little bit better. But I do think that there are signs that are extremely encouraging, showing you where this team can go. And if he gets all the way dialed in and he's hitting these throws down the field, they're going to be so hard to defend in the playoffs. And you couple that with the way Alvin ran in this game, and he's showing you late in the season he's healthy. They haven't had that. And that is such a luxury for them because you get into a game and, they got to figure out a way to take something away. And I remember a couple of years ago, They played Carolina in the first round. Carolina thought they could stuff the middle of the field, force Drew to throw the ball to the sidelines, and that would be the way to beat him. It wasn't. And he hit those throws. And it looks like he's at a position now where he could hit those throws again. But let's say theoretically somebody takes away the middle of the field. Drew's, for whatever reason, can't hit those throws on the outside. They got the back now. They got the back. They can turn to him. They can hand him the ball, and he can carry him to hard yards. And I think that's so important. You know, Mike Thomas is a superstar. Jimmy Graham was a superstar for a period of time. Marcus Colston was. Reggie Bush, you know, he was a good player. Deuce was really, really good for this team. You know, at one point he was a superstar. But in the Peyton and Breeze era, I'm not sure that they've ever had a non-quarterback dependent player that could do the things that Alvin can do this late in the year. So, yeah, I remember I said on this podcast before the season started, I said, if Alvin's healthy, this team can make the Super Bowl. We're going to find out. You know, I do think, you know, when I made that statement, I was assuming Mike Thomas was going to be on the field, because why would you assume Mike Thomas was going to miss any time? He felt like a guy that couldn't get hurt. And, you know, obviously when you're saying things, you're talking about a team through the most optimistic prism. But if Mike does get on the field and they have him, Alvin, and Drew's going the way that, you know, just good enough. Drew just has to be good enough. He has to be dialed in just enough. Mike gets out there. I think it puts him over the top. So I think everything hinges really on Mike Thomas being healthy at this point. You know, it sounds like he's going to be back sooner than later. I do think that the team knew going into the Philadelphia game that Mike was going to play in that game and then shut it down and get healthy for the playoffs. Things have been bothering him for a while. So, you know, I don't think it was a surprise that, you know, he was sitting after that game. I think they were giving that game its best shot. And, you know, you win that game, you get Breeze back, and, you know, you go forward from there. Seeding's obviously very important. They want the bye, but I don't think the bye defines this postseason. You know, I don't think that you want to go into Green Bay, obviously, and play in that snowy stuff that was there this week for their game. I think the Saints could win in that atmosphere. They're built in a way to succeed in that type of atmosphere theoretically. You know, you look at snow, and the number one thing is balance and being able to keep your footing. Nobody does that better than Alvin. You know, I think he'd be fine in the snow. I think he'd be able to run. I think the offensive line, you know, obviously it isn't what it was maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. Still a pretty good group. You know, they're built to run behind that line. That line's built to win in the trenches and hold up in those situations. So, you know, I think the running game will be fine in Green Bay. And then the offense is, you know, everybody likes to talk about air yards. Well, ball control plays in the snow. So I think offensively they would be able to go up there and succeed, assuming that the weather isn't this huge shock to them. But the other thing is too, look, there aren't a lot of snow games where it actually snows the day of the game to the point where you can't clear the field and you're playing in literal mounds of snow. You know, sometimes it's icy, sometimes it's wet, and you can assume that's going to happen. And look, it's possible to get a snow game in the playoffs, but again, you don't see a whole lot of those types of games. It's usually snowed, stopped, and the field gets cleared off. So, I mean, it's possible again, but it's not like because you're going somewhere it snows and it has snowed before that the field's going to be covered in snow, you know. So it would be interesting. And I think the Saints can go anywhere in the NFC and beat anybody. I don't think that they're dependent on home field. I don't think it matters as much as in previous years. You know, the good teams win wherever they go. And if a team comes into the Superdome and they play better than the Saints, there's not going to be this like X factor thing that could play a part in possibly change things up and put them in a situation where the crowd takes the team out of it or whatever. You know, it's just we're in a point right now where the better teams win these games, and that stuff's gone. The home field stuff is gone. So, it isn't. If the Saints get healthy, I think they can beat, again, anybody anywhere. Obviously, I think there's some teams that they pair up against better than others. I think the Bears would be a great game for them. I think the Rams would offer some challenges. Jared Goff being hurt is you hate to put it this way, but he's hurt, so that's not a team that I think that you fear too much offensively. I think before they were having some issues. Now he's hurt, so that's kind of a good team to play. I do think that obviously their defense is solid, and then I think Aaron Donald is the guy that kind of matches up against the Saints' greatest weakness, or at least displayed weakness to this point, which is the interior offensive line. So that's one situation that's potentially a little bit, it scares you a little bit, because it's Aaron Donald, and your interior line has been messed up a little bit. The other thing too is I saw Cooper Kupp, I think today, went on the COVID list. You do the math, 7. He might be back in time for the playoffs, but that would be something too. He'd be out of action for a little bit if that is indeed a positive test and he's showing symptoms and he's got to stay away. So I don't think that would probably affect him too much, but you never know. The team that's kind of, and we'll see if they even make the playoffs. I do think Arizona, if there's one other issue for the Saints this year, it's been quarterbacks that can extend plays and get out of the pocket, and he can obviously do a lot of those things. Kyler Murray, they are a little bit dependent on him being great and all that stuff. Experience, I think, it's going to be interesting to see if experience and all that stuff kind of plays out the same way in the playoffs, because I think that matters in handling the situation and the bigness. You go out there and it's just such a big game, and the atmosphere is bigger, and you just hear the desperation in the crowd, and all that stuff in a normal year. Well, that's probably not going to be out there in a lot of places. Dallas has a ton of fans in their stadium, but I don't think too many other places do. And if Dallas gets in the playoffs, they'll never, one home game, I guess. So I don't know how much home field, matters this year. And then I think home field is part of that experience conversation too. I mean, yeah, the game changes, it gets tougher in the preparation and all that stuff. But I don't know how shook anyone's going to feel in these playoff games when they go out there and it's just, it's another empty stadium, just like it was 2-3 weeks ago. I think it's much easier to make everything feel the same when there's nothing in the room. You just keep walking into an empty room. Somebody tells you it's more important. You might walk in a little bit different, but once you're in there, it's still just an empty room. And that's going to be interesting to me. Kyler in the playoffs, if they get in, he's played in a lot of big games too throughout his career, college career. But a young team in the playoffs might not matter as much this year. So it'll be interesting to see who they get, who they got to play. I don't really think it matters that much in the first round. They got to win the game. The better team's going to win. The Saints are better than all these teams. They should be, if they're healthy, they should be much better than all the teams they could play. I don't think it matters. They just got to go out. They got to be ready. They got to play. The one thing too that keeps coming up, and it's going to keep coming up, we're going to keep having this conversation, so you might as well just knock it out now. This idea that the Saints are like this one and done playoff team is something I haven't quite been able to understand the level and the conviction behind these conversations. For this team, it kind of feels like the era started in 2017. That's a whole new team. I think you start the chapter over. You don't look back at, games with Marshawn Lynch, games, against Vernon Davis. Those games don't really pertain any longer to this team. I mean, they pertain to the coach, the quarterback, and the punter, I guess. And, I do think that if there were things that Peyton was doing wrong before, which I don't think he was, but if you want to question the preparation or whatever in the history, I think you got to start it over at 2017 and see what lessons he started. So I think blank slate 2017 forward, I don't really see this team as like this huge playoff choker. They've won playoff games every year. They got beat on a freak play in 2017. You know, I'll go to my grave thinking that was the year that team should have won the Super Bowl too. I really do. I know Philly got rolling, Nick Foles, all that stuff. I think the Saints would have beat them. I really do. That felt like the year to me that, you want to talk about that team rolling. I felt like the Saints had the magic that year. And it's a stupid thing to say. And those aren't the conversations I like to frame football through. But, I do think that you have to catch a feeling and you get rolling and it all plays a part. I feel like that team had something. I felt like they had something behind it. There was something special happening, and then it's gone. But it's a freak play. That stuff happens. The next year I seem to remember the whole city protesting in the streets because they got robbed a trip to the Super Bowl. So I mean, they played good football that year. Last year against Minnesota, bad game. Bad game. Did not play well. Was not a good game. But like the idea and the stigma that this is like a one and done team, this team, this core, it's just not true. They had one really bad playoff game. The 2017 Minnesota game too started bad. So I'll give you that. But they fought their way back. They got in position to win, and they should have won. They should have won. It was a extremely winnable game, and they didn't win it because of a freak play. And, that stuff happens. It happens, and you come back, and then the next year it got taken away. But, I'm not looking at this like they're going into the playoffs and they just don't have it, this team's always choking in the playoffs. What are they going to do differently? No, that's not how I would cover the story at all. Because I just don't think that's the truth. I think that they've played good playoff games and things have happened. And they had one really, really flat one. And Taysom tried to pull him out of it. He couldn't do it. And that's just kind of where it ended up. So, this week's game against Carolina, they got to get it. They got to win it. They should win it. I don't think it really makes a difference either way if the other stuff for the playoff bye doesn't happen. Because again, I just don't, I don't think home field is a huge deal. It just doesn't feel like a real thing. So, whatever happens Sunday, if Green Bay wins their game, I don't think it really matters what the Saints do. I mean, you want the higher seed, yeah. Just because, and then you potentially get home field back if something happens. So, I think all that's important, but the idea that, it's just, it just doesn't seem to matter to me. I don't know. But anyways, there are a few things that I think need to happen. I think number one, chief among them, and we're going to get a look at it this week. And it's a look that we've already seen, is just getting over the loss of Quan Alexander, which, I do think is a significant deal. You lose a lot. You lose a lot on defense. Anzalone's good. He's solid. He does a lot of things well. I think he's better in the run just because he's more consistent in the run. I don't think he's as apt to make a mistake. Quan made a handful of mistakes in the running game, which, did bite them pretty good against Philly especially. But, it's something that they're going to have to figure out. It hurts a lot in the passing game. Quan's ability to read, diagnose, get in the flats, break up passes, cover Travis Kelce. He broke up a pass to Tyreek Hill. He did a lot of really good things in coverage. And in a matter of a span of 5 games, he had 2 fumble recoveries, a bunch of pass breakups. He was a really good player for this team, in his own respect. Missed a ton of tackles, wasn't always assignment sound, but the explosiveness and the playmaking ability that he brought to the table was huge. It was such a good trade. Such a good trade that they made. I think if you look at this team going into next season, we'll see what happens with Quan. Torn Achilles is rough. He has some guaranteed money, $2 million on an injury guarantee. So, maybe there's a renegotiation and they found a way to bring him back at a lower price. See how his health goes. But I think top of the list. maybe not number one, but somewhere at the top of the list. That rangy linebacker, I think, has to be some type of priority for this team because we just saw what it can do and how it transforms the defense. And, that's kind of why they were coveting that position coming into the season, was because of all the things that Quan has brought to the field. That those are the things that they've been missing on that side of the ball. So you put that up there, but what are they going to do? Anzalone goes back in, I think. I don't know if Zach Bond's ready to do more than what he's doing. So, I'm just looking at Anzalone at this point. Bond started to get some more base snaps. So he'll fill in. And then I think when Marcus Williams gets healthy, you'll probably see more dime packages. And that can be another way for this team to, go about getting the coverage it wants on the field. But the thing with Quan is he covers well, and he's a big body. He plays the run well enough, and you aren't sacrificing as much by taking him off and putting a safety on it. Someone isn't going to surprise you with the run. You can get a heavier box with him in there. You take him out and you put Swearing or PJ Williams on the field, you're getting smaller. And those guys defend the run well. They don't have the same, size as Quan to get through it. So that's going to be something they got to figure out over these next couple of weeks. Mike Thomas can't come back for another week. Deontay Harris can't come back for another week. So we'll see how those things progress. It sounds good. Peyton made both situations sound positive when speaking on the radio with Streif and Bobby Hebert this week. So we'll see how those things go. Sean's typically a little bit more open with them than he is with the non-football players who ask him questions. So I'll take him at face value on those. P-Rob can come back this week. We'll see how that progresses. Josh Hill has a finger injury. Might miss some time. We'll see on that. Adam Troutman's really stepped up and played well. So that helps if Hill has to miss, a game or two or no time at all, whatever it is. Troutman, though, is looking like a guy that can fill in and do a lot of stuff for them. And it's really encouraging to see his progress. And I'm excited to see what he does next season. I think he'll contribute in the playoffs and all that. But I want to see the growth next season. I'm excited to see what kind of leap he can make with a normal offseason, normal practices, normal training, knowledge of the playbook, comfort, all that stuff. I think at some point he's going to be a really good player for them. He already is. Callaway's run blocking I thought was encouraging in this game in some moments. Other moments you saw him miss pretty badly. And there's still some rawness there. Undrafted rookie, learning the game. Speed of it probably gets to him every now and then. In the passing game, he looks comfortable. He's a willing run blocker. Another guy that's been really good for them. Year from now, we're going to see what they do. But I think it's important for him to keep settling in. It's probably a silver lining that he gets another week with Breeze without Mike Thomas on the field, because they didn't necessarily get a lot of throws in last week, him and Breeze. So some forced work, I think, will be good for him to just pick it up and get on the same page. He's going to have to do all this stuff. Traquan had his surgery, so he's out. He's on the IR. It's going to be, a little while before he's back on the field, if at all, this year. We'll see if they keep winning games, if he can make his way back at the end of it. So, Callaway getting going is huge for them, and we'll see. It'll be interesting, too, just to see how Harris and Thomas return. They got to be in shape. They're out for a little while. I assume both of them are doing everything they can to stay in shape and ready to go. Mike's Mike. I think he's going to hit the ground running no matter what. He's too much of a competitor to not be doing everything he can to be in shape. If I were him and knowing his mentality, it's just not something I worry about. I don't worry about him coming back playing, being in shape or anything like that. So we'll see how those guys do. But I think those are the big things kind of going into the playoffs. Marcus Williams got to get healthy too. The ankle, that's huge. Such a huge injury for them. Trey Hendrickson should be back sooner than later. He practiced most of the week, had a stinger. I think they're just being cautious. Again, I think they're even looking at it like They want the number one, all that stuff, but being healthy in the playoffs outweighs everything else. So, it's kind of managing both things at the same time. Malcolm Brown should be back soon too. I watched him go through, the game time. He was a true game time decision. All the trainers watching him before the game, seeing how he does. He ran, he tested it. They're watching him, and you could tell at the end of it, he just didn't pass everything. But he should be back too. So, I think by playoff time, there's a good chance that this team's more healthy than not. And if that happens, puts them right where they need to be to make that run. So, I just talked for 30 minutes straight by myself. Hopefully Kevin will be back next week. He will be. Not a hopefully, he will be back next week. Because, man, it is hard to talk for 30 minutes straight. And much respect to the radio guys that do this every day. Because I definitely could not. If you're still listening, definitely appreciate you. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. But most importantly, if you like the podcast, again, NewOrleans.Football /subscribe. Anything you guys can do, man. Like, it's super appreciated. And everybody who's already in, thank you. Everybody who's considering it, I'm telling you it's worth it. And thank you for even considering it. But with that, cutting it here. We'll talk to you guys soon.